What if one of the healthiest vegetables you've been eating every week is actually making it harder to control your blood sugar? Not because you're doing something obviously wrong, not because you ignored your doctor's advice, but because nobody ever told you that certain vegetables, the ones marketed as healthy, the ones that appear on every diabetes-friendly food list, can behave very differently inside the body of someone with type 2 diabetes, and depending on how you prepare them, when you eat them, and what you eat them with, they can cause blood sugar spikes that feel completely impossible to explain. If you've ever checked your glucose after a meal that felt completely reasonable and seen a number that didn't make sense, this video may finally give you the answer you've been looking for. Stay with me, because what you're about to learn changes how you look at your plate. Let's start with something that most people in the diabetes space never say clearly enough. Vegetables are not all the same, not nutritionally, not metabolically, and definitely not in terms of how they affect blood sugar in people with type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance. The general advice: eat more vegetables. Fill half your plate with vegetables. Vegetables are always a safe choice, is well-intentioned, and for many people without blood sugar issues, it's largely accurate. But for people with type 2 diabetes, that blanket advice can be quietly misleading, because certain vegetables contain significant amounts of starch, and starch, when digested, converts to glucose, raising blood sugar in ways that can be surprisingly significant depending on portion size, preparation method, and the metabolic context of the person eating them. The vegetable itself isn't always the problem, but for someone whose body already struggles to clear glucose efficiently, someone with insulin resistance, reduced metabolic flexibility, or compromised pancreatic function, even a vegetable that appears on a healthy foods list can contribute to post-meal blood sugar spikes that accumulate over time and undermine glucose control in ways that are genuinely difficult to trace back to the source. Here's the hidden diabetes food pattern that nobody talks about enough. You make what feels like a careful, responsible meal choice. You include vegetables. You avoid the obvious sugar. You feel like you did everything right. And then you check your blood glucose an hour or two later, and the number doesn't match your expectations. That disconnect between the effort you're putting in and the results you're seeing is one of the most frustrating experiences in diabetes management, and for a significant number of people, that disconnect traces directly back to one specific category of vegetables that has been hiding in plain sight inside their diabetes diet for years. To understand why this happens, you need to understand a few things about how vegetables actually interact with blood sugar, because this is where the real education begins. The first concept is glycemic impact versus nutritional value. These are two completely separate things. A food can be extraordinarily nutritious, packed with vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and fiber, and still produce a significant blood sugar response in someone with type 2 diabetes. Nutritional value and glycemic impact do not always move in the same direction. Potatoes are a perfect example. Nutritionally, they contain potassium, vitamin C, vitamin B6, and meaningful amounts of fiber in their skin. They are a real, whole food with genuine nutritional benefits. But they are also one of the highest glycemic vegetables available, meaning they convert to glucose rapidly after eating and produce blood sugar spikes that can be dramatic, especially in people with insulin resistance. Corn is another example. Sweet peas, parsnips, beets in large quantities, winter squash varieties like butternut and acorn. These are all real foods with real nutritional value, and they all contain enough starch or natural sugar to produce meaningful blood sugar responses that people with type 2 diabetes often underestimate. The second concept is how cooking methods change blood sugar response. This is something that surprises almost everyone the first time they hear it. The same vegetable, prepared differently, can produce dramatically different glycemic responses. A boiled potato produces a significantly higher blood sugar spike than a potato that has been cooked and then cooled before. Eating because cooling converts some of the digestible starch into resistant starch, which behaves more like fiber and doesn't raise blood sugar as aggressively. Mashed potatoes produce a higher glycemic response than whole boiled potatoes because the physical structure of the food has been broken down, making digestion faster and glucose absorption more rapid. Overcooked vegetables in general tend to produce higher glycemic responses than lightly cooked or raw versions because heat breaks down cell walls and fiber structures that would otherwise slow digestion. The third concept is the role of fiber and why it doesn't always save you. Fiber slows glucose absorption. That's true and important. But the fiber content of a vegetable doesn't automatically neutralize its starch content. A vegetable that is high in both fiber and starch still raises blood sugar just slightly more slowly than one with starch and no fiber. For someone with significant insulin resistance, even that slower rise can be enough to create a problematic spike. And the fourth concept, perhaps the most important for this conversation, is that insulin resistance changes everything. In a person without diabetes or insulin resistance, the body can handle a moderate blood sugar rise from starchy vegetables efficiently. Insulin is released, cells absorb the glucose, and blood sugar returns to normal within a reasonable timeframe. In a person with type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance, that process is compromised at multiple points. More glucose enters the bloodstream than the cells can efficiently absorb. Insulin response may be delayed or insufficient, and the glucose that should be cleared lingers, producing elevated post-meal blood sugar readings that last longer and go higher than they would in someone with normal metabolic function. This is why the same vegetable that is genuinely healthy for your neighbor can quietly be raising your blood sugar in ways you've never been able to explain. Now, it's talk about the mistakes. Because the vegetable itself is only part of the story. How you eat it and when often determines whether it supports your blood sugar control or undermines it. The first mistake is portion size. This is where most people go wrong without realizing it. A small portion of a starchy vegetable produces a manageable blood sugar response. A large portion of the same vegetable, double or triple the serving, produces a response that can be 2 or 3 times as significant. And because starchy vegetables look and feel like vegetables, not like bread or rice or pasta, most people with type 2 diabetes don't apply the same portion discipline to them that they would to more obviously high carbohydrate foods. Half a cup of mashed potato is a very different glycemic event than 2 cups of mashed potato. But on a plate, it can be hard to tell the difference, especially when you're focused on everything else in your meal. The second mistake is pairing starchy vegetables with refined carbohydrates, corn with a bread roll, potatoes alongside white rice, peas mixed into a pasta dish. Each of these combinations stacks glucose load on top of glucose load, creating a post-meal blood sugar spike that is significantly larger than either food would produce alone. The cumulative effect of these combinations is something that many people with type 2 diabetes experience regularly without ever identifying the specific source of the problem. The third mistake is overcooked or mashed preparations. As we discussed, cooking method matters. Heavily processed, mashed, or overcooked versions of starchy vegetables digest faster and produce larger, sharper blood sugar spikes than minimally processed versions of the same food. Choosing roasted over mashed, lightly steamed over boiled until soft, or raw, overcooked where appropriate, can make a meaningful difference in the glycemic impact of an otherwise identical meal. The fourth mistake is eating them late at night, and this is where the conversation connects directly to something we talk about consistently on this channel. Your body's ability to manage blood sugar is not constant throughout the day. Insulin sensitivity peaks in the morning and declines progressively through the afternoon and evening. By the time you sit down for a late dinner or an evening snack, your metabolism is already shifting toward the slower, less insulin-sensitive state that characterizes nighttime. A starchy vegetable eaten at noon produces a blood sugar response your body can handle relatively efficiently. The same starchy vegetable eaten at p.m. creates a blood sugar spike in an environment where your body is least equipped to clear it, and that spike can persist through the early hours of the night, elevating your overnight glucose levels and contributing directly to higher fasting blood sugar readings the next morning. The fifth mistake is skipping protein. Eating starchy vegetables alone or as the primary component of a meal without significant protein removes one of the most effective natural moderators of the blood sugar response. Protein slows digestion, reduces the glycemic impact of the meal, and promotes satiety in a way that carbohydrates alone cannot. Always pairing starchy vegetables with a meaningful source of protein. Eggs, fish, lean meat, legumes. Greek yogurt significantly moderates what would otherwise be a more aggressive blood sugar spike. Now, let's shift from problem to solution. Because the goal here is never to create fear around food, it's to create clarity about which choices consistently support better blood glucose control, and which ones quietly work against it. The vegetables that most reliably support stable blood sugar are the non-starchy ones, and they deserve far more attention than they typically receive in general nutrition conversations. Broccoli is one of the best. Low in digestible carbohydrates, high in fiber, rich in sulforaphane and chromium, both of which have been studied for their potential role in supporting insulin sensitivity and glucose regulation. It has a minimal glycemic impact and can be eaten in generous portions without meaningful blood sugar consequences. Spinach and other leafy greens, kale, arugula, Swiss chard are similarly excellent choices. They are extremely low in starch, high in magnesium, which plays a role in insulin function, and rich in antioxidants that support the metabolic health and reduce the inflammation that is closely linked to insulin resistance. Cauliflower has become well known as a low-carbohydrate substitute for higher starch foods, and for good reason. It can be used as a replacement for rice, mashed potatoes, or pizza bases while producing a fraction of the blood sugar response of those foods. Zucchini, cucumber, celery, asparagus, Brussels sprouts, green beans, cabbage, all of these are non-starchy, low-glycemic vegetables that people with type 2 diabetes can eat freely without significant concern for blood sugar spikes. The practical approach is not to eliminate starchy vegetables entirely, but to make non-starchy vegetables the foundation of your plate, and to treat starchy vegetables as a smaller, carefully portioned component rather than a main feature. Pair any vegetable, starchy or not, with protein and healthy fat. This combination consistently produces a more moderate, more manageable blood sugar response than carbohydrates consumed alone, and choose cooking methods that preserve, rather than break down, the fiber structures that slow glucose absorption. Light steaming, roasting, or eating certain vegetables raw where appropriate. These adjustments don't require a dramatic overhaul of your diet. They require awareness and a few consistent habits applied meal after meal. Let's bring this back to something that is at the core of everything we talk about on this channel, because the type of vegetable matters, the portion matters, the preparation matters, but when you eat, it may matter just as much as any of those things. Here's what happens to blood sugar management after dinner and why starchy vegetables consumed in the evening hours create a specific problem that compounds everything else we've discussed. After dinner, your body begins a gradual transition toward its nighttime metabolic state. Insulin sensitivity declines. Your metabolism slows. Your muscles become less active and therefore less able to absorb glucose independently of insulin. And the hormonal environment of your body shifts in ways that make glucose clearance progressively less efficient as the night goes on. In this environment, a blood sugar spike from a starchy vegetable, corn, peas, potatoes, butternut squash, doesn't resolve the way it would at noon. It persists. It elevates your overnight glucose levels, and it creates an elevated baseline from which the natural overnight hormonal processes, the dawn phenomenon, cortisol rise, liver glucose release, begin their work in the early morning hours. The result is often a morning blood sugar reading that seems disproportionately high given what you ate for dinner, because you're seeing the combined effect of an unresolved evening spike plus the natural overnight glucose-raising processes that affect everyone with type 2 diabetes. This is why after dinner, blood sugar and nighttime blood sugar are so deeply connected to seemingly innocent dinner choices, including the vegetables on your plate. The practical takeaway is simple. Keep starchy vegetables earlier in the day when your body is best equipped to handle them. In the evening, lean toward non-starchy options that produce minimal glycemic impact in the lower insulin sensitivity environment of nighttime. This single timing adjustment applied consistently can create a meaningful shift in your overnight glucose patterns and your morning fasting readings over time. Let's bring everything together with something practical you can start applying today. You don't need to fear vegetables. You don't need to eliminate entire food categories. And you definitely don't need a perfect diet to see meaningful improvement in your blood sugar management. What you need is a clearer understanding of which choices consistently support your glucose control and which ones have been quietly undermining it without any obvious signal to alert you. Choose non-starchy vegetables as the foundation of your meals more often. Broccoli, spinach, zucchini, cauliflower, leafy greens, asparagus. These are the vegetables that people with type 2 diabetes can eat generously and confidently without significant concern for blood sugar spikes. When you include starchy vegetables, watch your portion size carefully. A modest portion of corn, peas, or potato as a small component of a balanced meal is a very different glycemic event than a large portion eaten as the centerpiece of your plate. Always pair your vegetables with protein. This single habit applied consistently at every meal moderates the blood sugar response more effectively than almost any other dietary adjustment available to people with type 2 diabetes. Prefer lighter cooking methods over heavy processing, roasted over mashed, lightly steamed over boiled until soft. These small preparation choices change the glycemic impact of your meals more than most people realize. Save starchy vegetables for earlier in the day. Your body is better equipped to handle them at lunch than at dinner, and far better equipped at lunch than at 9 p.m. And monitor your own response. Every person with type 2 diabetes responds somewhat differently to specific foods. Checking your blood glucose 1 to 2 hours after meals gives you direct, personalized data about which foods are supporting your glucose control and which ones are working against it. Regardless of what any general food list says, small daily adjustments, consistent habits, patient observation, that combination repeated meal after meal, day after day, produces the kind of gradual, meaningful improvement in blood sugar management that no single superfood or extreme dietary restriction can match. Your body can respond better than you think when you give it the right information, the right foods, in the right portions. At the right times, it has more capacity to regulate blood sugar effectively than most people with type 2 diabetes have ever been shown. Before you go, I want to ask you something. Which vegetable surprised you the most today? Or have you ever noticed your blood sugar rise after eating something you thought was completely safe? Leave your answer in the comments below, because your experience with hidden diabetes foods might help someone else finally connect a dot they've been missing for years. If this kind of practical, evidence-based diabetes nutrition content is useful to you, subscribe to Health Insight MD. We're here every week with information that helps you understand what's actually happening with your blood sugar and what you can actually do about it. And don't miss our next video where we uncover another hidden habit that may be affecting your blood sugar every single day without you even realizing it. Take care of yourself, and we'll see you there.